Welcome back to another episode of Pushing Back Cars with me, Paul Noel McFadden. I hope you guys are all well, checking in. I hope you're keeping an eye on your mate and giving each other a phone call, reaching out to those people around you that you haven't spoken to for a while, and sharing the love. I'm here joined by my mate Mike. How you going, mate?
Melon, what's up, dude? Greetings from the great state of Texas. I'm just yeah, dude, hanging out back. It's a chilly day down here. It's like 49 Fahrenheit. In Australia, that's cold. And and yeah, man, just hanging out. It is a sunny day. There's not a cloud in the sky, so I'm just laying back here with my leg propped up and enjoying the sun. It feels good to be out and about instead of being kind of restrained to my place while I'm healing. But everything's going pretty well with that. And
Can you give us a little update just for those who haven't been in for a little while? Mike recently had knee reconstruction surgery after a significant knee injury incurred during heavy SF reinforcement training, like while doing some airborne insertions. A heavy landing blew a knee. He carried on for another 2 months and then had to go for knee surgery when he found he'd actually had destroyed his knee 2 months prior. And where are we now? A couple of weeks post-op, and you're in the rehab phase. Could you give us a little update, maybe?
Yeah, just a lot of physical therapy. But everything's going pretty well. It's healing. I think the worst part is the atrophy part of it, with the quad and strengthening the quad and getting it to fire. Like, I never truly understood how much coordination it goes from the brain to the body, and like not having like any doubt when you're trying to make movement or do anything. So I got to keep my knee brace or my leg brace on to keep my leg straight most of the time. But when I'm sitting, you just bend it and try to keep movement. Like, movement is good. Movement is medicine. And you don't want to stay propped up. You don't want to sit here around. But physical therapy is good. They're moving it around. And my goal is by the end of next week, which is when this episode is going to be coming out, actually, I should be getting off crutches and starting to learn how to walk by myself again. And that's about a month out, roughly 4 weeks. So I feel pretty good about it. I've been hitting it hard, but being responsible. I'm not, like we talked about, it's not a muscle, it's a tendon. So you got to be a little different, but I'm hopeful for that. So I have a goal in mind. It's important to have small goals. And no, it's going well, but I had to get out, and I came down here to Texas last night. It was pretty cool. I'm not a big baseball fan, but the Texas Rangers won the World Series last night. They won it 4-1 in the series, and they were the first team in history to win all 16 away games in the postseason and to win it.
Right.
So that was pretty cool to see, and everybody was excited down here. So anytime it's a good environment, people are winning, it's great. As long as you're not the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals, or the Baltimore Ravens, no one gives a shit, about any of those three teams. But
oh no,
but anybody else is fine.
What are the Texan baseball fans like?
They're just wild Texans, man.
Do they get into it? Are they a rowdy crowd?
Yeah, I mean, anything in Texas is big, right? So being a guy from Pennsylvania, like, yeah, we like football, hockey, and baseball. Same with Texas, particularly Dallas. And it's a rowdy bunch, man. But they're kind of the same way. They expect greatness. They expect the Super Bowl every year, World Series every year, the Stanley Cup every year. Like, it's a very competitive, very proud place, and it is fun to be around. It's a good energy. So that was a good time.
Oh, that's great, man. Over here, I've carried on with my sort of fly in, fly out work, where I go away and stay up at a base, work remotely, living out at the Mountables during the week, and then come back. In the last week, you would have heard me talking about how Cherry was going back to Australia to see her dad, who has sort of had a bit of a significant decline in his health. In an aged care facility. She flew in. Her sister also flew in from New Orleans, Louisiana, where she married a U.S. Navy guy back in the day. Shout out to Derek and Laura. So Laura flew in from there, and Cherry flew in from here, and they spend time with their dad and spend time with each other, and a lot of really great family time. Very stressful period, I can't lie about how it is. It's a difficult time facing the end of a family member, and that's getting close. I just family time though. Like, I was away for a couple of nights and then back, and it was just me and the kids 4 days, and I just had such a great family time. Like, hanging out with the kids and listening to music and eating meals together, and going to the gym with Michael, and taking them out to have dinner with our mate Simon, who's been on the podcast before. Dropping Michael off to see a film with a couple of his mates, getting eyeballs on these boys and shake their hand and see what sort of eye contact we get out of it and all that sort of stuff. It was good.
That's good, man.
Yeah.
It was,
but just good family time.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Cheza and her family and her dad and everything. We've been praying for you, and just everything. I saw the picture of her and her sister with their dad, and it was just very emotional, man. But if anything, times like that just remind us all to don't take time for granted. Like,
yes,
we're not going to be here forever, and just soak up every moment. I listened to this country song the other day. It's called "Till You Can't," and it basically talks about all these things. It's like, keep doing it until you can't, and it's a beautiful song. Reminds me of a lot of things in my life, and I'm sure everybody can relate to it. But I listened to that when I saw the picture Cheza sent to me with her and her sister, and that song came on, and I was like, yeah, man, till you can't. It's what we should be doing. Don't take anything for granted, and you just never know when it's time that we're going to lose someone or miss a situation or an opportunity. So
it's very true. And honestly, it's also prompted just some practical thought between us, just about our own end times. And I know that there'll be a lot of military first responders here who for us, these kinds of things have been a simple consideration pretty much since you sign up. Nearly all of us. I know I had to at 17 fill in a will as part of joining the Australian Army, and that's always been a normal thing for me, just to make sure that those parts of your estate planning and just that end of life, you can be responsible around this stuff. And, it's prompted some good conversations for us around making sure that we're going to have a document in place so that our kids are not left trying to guess and figure out what are our wishes. It'll already be hard enough for them. We had a good conversation with Simon last night. He was over and talked about the same thing, about just having everything clearly listed out and, budgeted for and all that kind of stuff, that you can try and minimize the burden on your loved ones when you go. And I know that, us and our audience and like our people out there, that, we live our life focused on helping those people around us and sorting out our community and setting it up. And perhaps there can be some shared conversations that grow out of this, that we can just make sure that those things are taken care of. And I do encourage people to consider that.
No, absolutely.
But I guess
well, just real quick. I mean, something that you said, and I think it pops in all of our head when you're talking about leaving behind like a will. I was 19 years old when I joined, and I'm filling out my will in case I die. And it's a wake up call. But
yeah,
there's a sense when you're young is just feeling like, well, I don't need to fill that out. Like, I'm not going to die. Like, everything's fine, and I'm not going to die till I'm an old man, like laying in my bed, and I'm a 90, and I've lived a full life and did all this stuff. Well, there's things that remind you about that every single day that we should pay attention to and have respect for. Down here in Texas, there was a Army veteran who, our good friend, he's like another brother to me, Patrick Sowers, in Operation Once in a Lifetime. They helped out and sent this Army veteran. She was a female, and her daughter to the Taylor Swift concert down here. That was like their thing. Like, they absolutely love Taylor Swift. I'm not a Swiftie. I'll come out and say it. I'm not a Swiftie.
Come on, mate.
I know. I don't sing.
You can share with me. There's no one else here. No one will hear this.
I don't sing her in the shower, and I hate the whole Travis Kelce, Kansas City Chiefs thing. Every time there's football, there's Taylor Swift on now, so it's ruining it. But regardless, the point is, they got to go have this once in a lifetime experience, and it really was a once in a lifetime, because a week later, her mother was crossing the street and was hit by a car and was killed instantly. And now this little girl, Layla, her name is, she doesn't have any parents. I guess her father wasn't really in the picture, and now her mother's gone. And you know how how impactful, man, because I mean, you and I both know what it's like to lose our parents at a young age, and you know what
It's terrible, man.
that that future for her is just going to be instantly so much harder. But also in the long run, which I want to meet her down here soon while I'm here and sit down and talk to her about life and maybe some things to think about her future and as she moves forward, like the things that are good that can come from it. Not initially, obviously, when you lose somebody, you're in pain and you're grieving, which is essential. But later on in life, you kind of see the bigger picture of like, man, now I get it. Now I can see why, I am the way I am and what I took from that and the blessing that it kind of taught me and the lessons that it taught me. So, um, she was a veteran. She had a will signed out that was already there from the Army, and it set it up. And I think this is partially a good thing to discuss with our topic today
Yes.
is, November 11th is upon us, and in the United States, it's our Veterans Day. In Australia, it's Remembrance Day, and Melon and I are both going to talk about that for a little bit. But also, it's always important to discuss the importance of veterans and their role in society and why we should honor and respect them for the things that they do and that they gave up. No matter what conflict, no matter what country, um, it's a calling of something bigger than yourself, and it's to be honored and respected.
100%. There's been, Remembrance Day, 11/11, when the guns fell silent on the Western Front in World War One, has been memorialized, and solemn procedures take place all around the Western world to recognize what occurred. And I know that is a day that is important to serving members and veterans and families, and it's appropriate that we take the time to discuss it. It's a key or a core value that's close to the heart of us and the people who are in our community, Mike.
Yeah. Well, Veterans Day came from World War One as well, and it was honoring veterans and bringing people together. And a big common one with Veterans Day is the yellow ribbon. So people will hang up yellow ribbons for veterans and stuff here in the U.S. And in Australia, I believe it's the poppy flower, correct?
That's correct, yeah. All around the British Commonwealth, it's a red poppy that we tend to wear, which is what grew on the fields in Flanders in Belgium.
Yep. Flanders Field. Yep.
Exactly. Flanders Field.
Yeah. It's an emotional day for a lot of people, man, because I'm still active duty, so I don't know what it means to be a veteran yet because I'm still in it. But something personally, I've been off for over the past month, just surgery and recovering. And honestly, I've been sitting there trying to think about like, what am I supposed to be learning from this? And one of the things that I've realized in the last week or so is this is a preview of being a veteran, because I'm not off the train completely, but it's like, hey, we're going to drop you off at the train station and we'll be back to pick you up, in a little while. And then you're sitting at the train station and it's quiet. There's no action. You're not moving 100 miles an hour. You're not contributing, you're just kind of floating, man. And honestly, I took it as like, wow, this is a heads up. This is a lesson about what it means to be a veteran. And I've been finding myself having discussions about, who am I going to be when this is over? When you leave active duty service, and you're just Mike, you're just whoever, like you're just a person. You're not your title anymore. You're not the rank that you achieved. All these different things. You're not wearing your medals out or your uniform all the time, and people recognizing you, wanting to come up and do all these things. And it's been really good for me. I'm not going to lie, because I've definitely taken a small shift on what I should be focusing on, what I should be more appreciative of, and ultimately grateful for like everything that I've been a part of. And instead of focusing on my past and what was and what should be, or like anything like that, it's really living in the present and understanding that like this is just an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than myself, but it's not going to last forever. And like we talk about, this is going to come to an end, and one day I'm just going to be Mike, and I'm going to be, hey, yeah, man, I served and I was a veteran, and all that great times and great stories I'll have for the rest of my life. Nobody will ever take that away from me, but my purpose is going to change. And for veterans, the reason we honor veterans on Veterans Day is because of what they gave up, what they sacrificed, what they committed to. They raised their right hand saying, I will give my life for yours in the event that I need to preserve our freedom, our society, our way of life, my family, the loved ones, everything. And that in and of itself is to be honored.
Yes.
Selfless people giving up their time, their most valuable currency, for other people that they don't even know. That is to be honored in a society, because if we don't, we're going to not have any appreciation for anything that we have, or a view of ourselves, or maintain the fire, the torch that gets passed from generation to generation on a belief, on a vision, on a feeling that's very special. Call it patriotism if you want. I just call it a feeling. You just feel it or you don't. And it's a day that it's meant for these people. And personally, I don't think it should just be a day. I think it should be a year-round thing. Like whatever you have and what you've been doing, you should always give thanks to those who put their lives on the line. But it is definitely a day where it brings back a lot of emotion, a lot of memories, some good, some funny, some really bad, some really painful. And people make their way to rallies, parades, cemeteries, share stories about loved ones. All of it, man. And it's a very heavy day. But it's just, it's just so important, Melon. Like we should all understand why we have that. And to me, in today's society, there's not a lot of people that really do. The veterans know, their families know, whatever, but there's so many other people that really don't get it. And that hurts. You want to force it, but then you don't.
Well, it's like, this is our role. This is the role of people like you and I, and a lot of our community, just to make sure that people understand where these days come from. November 11 initially was called Armistice Day. So it's the 11th of November. Just a quick little background here. So 11 November, it all started 1918. It was the end of World War One. The Commander-in-Chief of Allied Forces, Ferdinand Foch, Frenchman, sent a telegraph around saying hostilities will cease on the entire front, November 11 a.m. French time. And journalists at the time wrote about the officers having their watches in their hands, and the troops waited with the same grave composure with which they had fought. As the watch hands reached 11, there came a sound of expectant silence, and then a curious rippling sound which observers far behind the front likened to the noise of a light wind. It was the sound of the men cheering from the mountain to the sea. So that's where it all started. You can just picture these men in trenches having endured what was at that stage the most horrific combat losses the world had ever seen. And it'd be pretty crazy to be told at breakfast time that everything's ending today, but the fighting, it hasn't stopped already. It's going to stop at 11 a.m. And so people waiting, a conflict that had caused the loss of over between 9 and 13 million dead, a third of those with no grave. And that 70 million people who'd been mobilized into it. So the Allied countries, who are they? Who are the people who celebrate this stuff? So it's the Western Allies. It's a free association of independent states united by shared values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And we've stood together. So you got the US, the UK, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, France. It became such a big day after that. It was the first year, so 1919 was the first day. It was called Armistice Day. And they had a service. And it was really it was not a celebration. It was a memorial for the fallen in 1919. And the war cabinet in Britain was petitioned by, it was actually a journalist, a guy out of South Africa. He wrote a letter saying that there should be a time to memorialize what had happened. And he had 4 points. He said it was due to the women who have lost and suffered and borne so much, with whom the thought is ever present. It's to the children that they know, to whom they owe their dear fought freedom. It is due to the men and from them as men. But far and away above all else, it is due to those who gave their all, sought no recompense, and with whom we can never repay our glorious and immortal dead. So then in the UK, King George V requested that the people around the British Empire suspend activities for 2 minutes. And they had that first Armistice Day in honour of the armistice which stayed the worldwide carnage of the 4 preceding years and marked the victory of right and freedom. And so they then had 2 minutes silence at the main memorial in London, at the Cenotaph, it's called. And then 1920, we started the tradition of the unknown soldier. So in 1920, there was a soldier from the Western Front who was returned from France to the UK, and he was buried in Westminster Abbey with full military honours, and another one at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. In London, they had over 1 million people who came through for a week and paying respect. So that was 1920 in the UK and France. 1921, the US, an unknown soldier was repatriated from cemetery in France and taken to the US Capitol Rotunda. And he was laid in state and was then interred in the Memorial Amphitheatre, famous at the Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, where in 2021 I was very privileged to be taken by Mike to witness that. In 1958, unknown soldiers from World War II and the Korean War were interred alongside their World War I comrade. In Australia, there was a long process which started in the 1920s, but in 1993, actually, they brought a man home, 75th anniversary. He was taken and laid up in the Hall of Memory of the Australian National War Memorial in Canberra on the 11th of November, 93. And the same have taken place in Canada and New Zealand. And all of the tombs have the same inscription, known unto God. And so these individual soldiers represent all of the fallen, and not just in those World War I conflicts. It's all of the fallen in all of these conflicts since the 20th century began. And it should mean something. We should be talking about it. We should be teaching our children. We should be thinking about the reasons that these servicemen put their hand up and stepped into such a perilous role to provide security for a very, very special community experiment to be undertaken, which is this democracy that we enjoy.
Yeah.
And we've stood shoulder to shoulder from then until now. Values that we stand for, that you described earlier, Mike, is the open society with universal voting, rule of law, separation of powers, human rights, civil liberties, and political freedom. And supporting these values and defending these values through the 20th century has seen we are living in the result of that effort. This modern society, the expansion that we've had, liberal democracy has become the predominant political system in the world. Everyone wants to get on board with these Western way of life. It's the cost to deliver this since the start of World War One, the figure is more than 31 million service personnel. 31 million service personnel. So it's easy to sort of not be able to hold on to those figures or to be able to keep that loss. And it's the 11th. And the West has turned the tide against fascism and communism. And it has been immeasurable sacrifices brought in this current period where we have freedom and safety. And we should, if either of those regimes had dominated, like if Nazism had won, if Imperial Japan had won, or if communism had won, and we lived, what would the world be like? So Remembrance Day is a big deal. And, you know, we all have slightly different accents. And there's, you know, slightly different rules, but the values are the same in these Western allied countries. And there's a reason why we keep standing together despite the years that pass. Mike.
Yeah, really well said, Melon, and lots of great information there. And believe me, we have different accents. Yes, you could be an Aussie see next Tuesday, or a or a goofy Yinzer from Pittsburgh. You know what I mean?
A Yinzer.
Yeah, a Yinzer. Yeah.
We love it.
But
we love the Yinzers.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, being around, being able to have the opportunity to travel around the world and work with different militaries and different stuff, and having discussions with Raf and Melon and our buddy Simon, and you know, so many other people, my friend in Lithuania that I still talk to 12 years later. The discussions we have are the same. The beliefs that we have are the same. The drive is the same. Selfless service is the same. It's a warrior's heart. It's a servant's heart. And it's very special when you come across from it. You'll find it all over the world. It's not to one area, to one country, to one belief. It's a human aspect that's bigger. And I think on Veterans Day, you know, and it's important to understand where and when, and you hear all these big things that come that Melon really well explained, but it needs to be, I believe, personalized a little bit more. And out of World War One, there was a quote from a journal from a private Martin Treptow, who was a runner on the Western Front, and he wrote in his notebook, which was his Bible as well, and he wrote this. And I think it's one of the, you can Google it, you can look it up, but I think it's one of the most special things a person can write while he was in a trench in the middle of World War One as a runner. And I'll read it. He said, "America shall win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the whole issue of the struggle depended on me alone." That, written in a moment in an environment like that, is something that leaves me in awe, man, because, you know, I try to think of myself where I've been in the world, in some really shit places, surrounded by evil, and to be able to look at the holistic portion of that and knowing that I'm part of something big, and I'm dedicating my whole soul, myself, everything I have to that. And where he says, I'll deal with it as if the whole issue depended on me alone. I think in anything you do, whether it's sport, whether it's family or anything, if you have that type of mindset, it's special. But when it comes to serving in the military, where it's like you may be required to give your life, and you're sitting there saying, yeah, hey, I'll do it because people are depending on me. That's a task that some people just don't even want to even think about, let alone go and do. And that takes a special type of person to be able to say, yeah, I understand it and I'll do it. Hearing those type of personal stories, man, that's what, to me anyway, and I think it's different for every veteran or people who are reflecting on this day. This is just for me. I remember personal stories. I remember deployments, workups, funny stories, hard times, going to funerals, and standing there and watching the American flag folded way too many times. Looking at the big picture of history and what I was part of, what you were part of, and being able to hopefully one day sit down with my grandson on my good knee and and sit there and explain to him why I gave 20 years of my life for something, and share stories of my friends and teammates and everybody I've come across during my career throughout the world, including Uncle Mellon. That is something that not everybody gets to do, and I'm not taking away anything, but when you can sit down and speak with veterans and speak with warriors, people who have been to the edge and back and seen outside of the circle and the security bubble that provide the security, those people speak different. And there are lessons and emotions that you will never get from anybody else along your path. Not on talk shows, not in the movies. It could be simulated, whatever. But please believe me, when you sit and talk with veterans, things are different.
It's so funny, Mike. Just last night we had farewell drinks for one of the Aussie guys. He is moving on after a couple of years. I played rugby with him, and he's an ex Royal Australian Navy pilot, veteran. And we're having farewell drinks, and pretty much the whole room was just full of former military pilots. And our mate Simon was there. And just at the end of the night, I just had exactly that experience you just said then, of people being in that space. And like, Simon didn't know some of the guys before last night, but it was like immediate, knew a few people, a couple of different operational deployments, and it was just, you could just see this little network building out of, I know we've got these mutual contacts, or we're in the same place, maybe on different dates. And then at the end of the night, it was exactly what you just described. It was people just sitting in a space of, you just knew that there was a shared experience and a shared understanding. There's a whole lot of things you didn't need to talk about that, no offense to people who haven't served, but there's a lot of questions they have that veterans don't have. You don't ask those questions. And then, so there's a whole bunch of stuff you don't have to talk about. And then there's all this other stuff that you can talk about because they understand. And I just had exactly that experience. I was like 24 hours ago, Mike, of sitting with guys who some of them had never met until that night, a couple of drinks, and able to sit and really share. I just watch it and think, I know that some of these guys have a lot of difficulty, partners and family and non-military mates. And you just described that ability to connect, and you've got like-minded people. It's a very special connection that you have with other people who've done that.
Yeah, there's exactly what you said. There was a few moments that I've had. So I'm getting old, right? But I'll be 36 here at the end of the month, and I'm looking at my whole life holistically. I know I'm young. I'm just kidding, right? Melon's old, not me. But every time I try to go home for the holidays, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, I make it a point to go to the Veterans Hospital, to the VA. And there's some older veterans, mostly Korea, that are hanging around, and Vietnam and everything. And they're laying in these hospital beds. Family's gone. None of them visit them anymore. And if you ever want to just be humbled and go in and listen to some stories, man, go to the Veterans Hospital and pay them a visit and just say, hey, I just wanted to say hello. I want to let you know that you're not forgotten. I want to hear your story, even for like 15, 20 minutes. I'll go to every room. I'll go to the nurse's station and I say, hey, who could I visit? I'm here? I take coffee and some snacks for the nurses staff. Because the one I go to, I know for a fact they do really well, which is important. Not all the VAs are like that. But I drop them off and I say, hey, thanks for looking out for these men and women. Like, they deserve the best. And I want to make that a point known. And then I'll ask them, hey, who's in what room? And, who's whatever. And then I'll bounce around the rooms for 15 to 20 minutes and just be like, hey, I'm just popping in. I just want to say hello. What's your story? Where'd you serve? What branch, and this, that, and you get to really know them. And I'll tell you, man, that personal relationship is something that I would never trade, because I walk out of every one of those rooms and I feel like I already knew the person. Like, they get excited to share their story, to tell you about their best friend that they served with, where they were. Funny stories come back, and then it just flows. It just comes out and flows. That's the best way I can do it. And I've walked out of those rooms smiling. I've walked out of those rooms crying. I mean, there's guys from Korea and Vietnam that I never even met before that, and I walk out and I'm like, I know that person. I know who they are, and it feels like I'd known them for 30 years. But that's the bond that Melon's talking about. That's what makes us a unique group, and we've all shared so many things in common, whether it was giving up our time, being deployed, worrying about one another, losing friends, losing family members, seeing the flag folded over our friends' coffins and burying them. So many different experiences go through your head. And then when you can sit and talk and learn, I believe that is still that fire that gets passed on, no matter where you are, Australia, United States, it doesn't matter. And to share those stories with the next generation and help them understand why it was important. The hardships that those people endured well after serving in civilian life, or some of them get out and they go on to do great things. Some people get out and lose their complete identity and purpose, and they struggle so much. And I personally have seen that for working with Pat and Operational Once a Lifetime for 12 years now, and hearing veterans call in, or I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what my purpose is. I wish I would have stayed in. I wish I would have made a career out of it. Nobody cares. They walk around and they just constantly wear all their military stuff because they want to hold on to it so tight that they can't see what's right in front of them. That's the next chapter of their life and their new identity and their new purpose. And there's just so many different aspects that are going back and forth all the time, that sometimes when you can just sit down and talk to a person and really talk to the person and understand the person, is what they need. Nothing lasts forever, and we talk about this. And Veterans Day is a point to stop and remember what happens when we're called to service. That some people have to make a decision to go and be a part of something bigger than themselves because it's the right thing to do. It's bigger than them. It's just. And when it's over, then who are you? Where do you fit in society? How should you be viewed? How should you be respected? How should you act? Should you educate other people on what you went through? Do you become a leader and share those lessons learned that you did within your own community. There's so many different options. Where do you start? And those things are relevant today after 20 years of the global war on terrorism. And there's millions of veterans who put on the uniform and served all over the world. And now I think we may be getting ramped up for another one, which is how history works, human history. So I'm not surprised, to be honest with you. But it's a period now where we've been kind of in a lull for the last couple years. And I see a lot of veterans going, where do I fit in society now? What do I do when there's no war? What do I do when there's no bad guy knocking on the door saying I'm going to come in and mess you up, and I'm going to stand up and say no, you're not. Like, if you can't do that, then what are you supposed to do? So many struggle with it, man. I mean, we
It's
can do a
interesting,
whole
isn't it,
episode.
Mike? Like the history of, yeah, we totally could. The history of like how veterans, what happens when you rotate out of your time in uniform, military, and then into civilian life. Like, there can be a really beautiful transition where you go from being the people on the border or people providing the security for the community to flourish to now it's your turn to participate. It's your turn to be in the community, knowing that the torch has been handed on to the next group, and now you're there in your community with your family in your workplace and moving forward with your life in a new way. Like, the Romans had a really interesting system with their veterans where they would settle them on the borders. Like, they would have, there was pretty much constant warfare at that time. And as the Romans were fighting on the borders and they'd settle an area and that would become peaceful, they'd have that legion and they'd reach their time in service ending, and they would settle them on the border. They'd give them all plots of land to farm, and they would transition then from being the soldiers to being the citizens, the farmers, the shopkeepers, and so on. But it kept those areas pretty peaceful, because if there was ever any trouble, there's all these fully trained men who are ready to pick up the equipment that they've got maybe over the fireplace or something, and then they could quieten those troubles. And so these areas, they were settled in these areas to quieten them and bring peace to the areas. And there's no one who hates war more than people who've seen it. And there's like an example you can follow there of, you've had your time protecting and providing the peace, and then now you can have your time afterwards when you're a veteran, where you get to enjoy the fruits of that labor, if you can, when it's time for someone else to take a watch.
Yeah, what's that famous quote? And I think you just spoke about its origin from the Roman Empire. Is it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And you really think about that. That's really your responsibility. I mean, as a veteran. And that next part you said, Melon, when the war is over and your time's over and you hand off that torch, nobody wants to see war less than the people who have witnessed and experienced it. I'll tell you, man, after almost 2 decades for me of a career of going to war or preparing for war, I've never had more of a desire to have peace in my life. Coming to a close, and I'm handing off the torch now as my career comes to an end, my first career. I have more visions about sitting in a park with a wife and children, watching them play and just be present, than I have any desire of doing anything related to war. Am I fully capable of it? Yes. And I think that's what we just spoke for, of like, if it comes down to it, you will make the worst decision in your life to mess with me or my family. because wrong person, wrong time, everything adds up. But
a man with a special skill set.
Yeah, exactly right. Which is what a man should be, and my opinion, and you should be capable of extreme violence and protecting or offense, whatever.
And women too, the mother wolf.
Oh yeah. That you want that mother wolf to come out, dude? She'll freaking rip your head off.
That's right.
But when I've envisioned my future, it is not war. I acknowledge it, but it's more about, man, now I really desire peace. I really desire to be present and home and have the opportunities to watch my kids grow, to be with my wife, to go on walks together and just hold hands and talk about stuff, about life and normal stuff, man. There's, if I always say, like, if you give me the choice now, it's just like, hey, you could have a family and peace and some land and a house and have your own little life tucked away or whatever, or you can go back to war. I would take the family and everything, hands down. Now, if it was required to go, like, hey, we have people invading or there's a world war again or whatever, then it's like, okay, in order to protect what I love, I have to go do these because I'm fully capable of doing it. So I'm going to go do it. But yeah, dude, that hit really deep. Like my heart's kind of like pounding right now. I was visiting home in Pennsylvania, and I picked up my mom and we went out to the park to walk to, well, I was on crutches, so I hobbled, but we were just talking about past things. She took me to this park as a kid. So we went out there and we had a picnic together, and she saw her great grandchildren that picked up, and we were walking around, and she used to take me there when I was a baby.
Oh, and, nice, mate.
Yeah, it was great. And we were kind of talking about that. And my great uncle Bobby came up, because I'm a great uncle now. How about that, dude? And
wow.
I know. And the one thing he told my mom when he knew that I wanted to serve was, please tell him to never glorify war. And that came from a Korean War veteran, a Marine combat veteran, a POW veteran. Never glorify war.
Wow.
And now that I've lived it and seen both ends of it, the honor and all that from one side, and then the pain and loss of the other, he couldn't be more right. And it's through time and experience and reflection that all veterans need to take a look at, and that's going to bring you to the most important things in life, which is your family, and being present, and peace, and being able to live a good, honorable, healthy life, not a miserable, broken down, drunk, drug addict, warmonger, pride and ego led type of life. That's not why we joined. We joined up to defeat the monster, not let it influence us to become monsters ourselves, but to be good men and women, good people, selfless people, and live a life worth living that others would inspire themselves to be like. Easier said than done, 100%. But
that's right, Mike.
But that's ultimately why we joined, right?
And I mean, that is a very good segue to, that we join to protect people from the monster, and we don't want to become the monster. And that it's a good reminder, or a segue perhaps, to just a brief to touch on the topic of PTSD, which is something we've talked about before, and that people who go and serve, and also the other frontline responders, but we're talking military service in this episode, are people who come home with sometimes invisible wounds, and that these can be these can mean that you don't get to return home to peace. And I feel like we're in a time now where we're moving beyond the stigma, but I think it still exists, certainly in some military, that people will want to be tough and strong and want to be the best and all the rest of it. But we should all be working together as as a group, as a collective, to get past the stigma that mental injuries are just as real as physical injuries. And, I've got some data on that as well here, that there was research in Australia that 17% of the veterans 2010 to 2015 suffered from PTSD. In Canada, they had a 60% increase in disability payments for mental health, 75% of those PTSD. Studies out of the US on the Iraq and Afghan veterans at 13.5% suffer from PTSD. So we're talking a very, very widespread. I mean, that's a pretty similar number across the board there.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the most frequently cited barriers to veterans getting timely and adequate care for PTSD is that social stigma that is associated with mental illness, and that members in some of these studies, it shows that guys and girls feel ashamed and embarrassed to receive treatment. That's perceived as a sign of weakness. And I like to think that we're in a position now where there is effective treatment that is available, and we don't have to have people remaining in this endless loop of suffering. So I just want to have a quick little shout out here, just saying that connecting in the networks, checking in on your mates, and steering people towards solutions that have worked. Cognitive behavioral therapy is very effective. I know that you, Mike, have had experiences and that you're a very strong advocate for treatment here. But I just feel like we should all probably at this time of year reach out into our networks and make sure that we check in on our mates and let them know what's worked if something has worked, and checking in on the guys that we know are having a hard time. So a simple text message or phone call, you never know how much of a positive effect that can have.
Yes, 100, dude. Yeah, call, text, have a meeting, have a group thing, like get together, hang out, have a fire, tell stories, maintain those relationships, and check on each other. Be willing to be vulnerable as well.
Yes.
Especially with each other. Who knows better than the person that you were in a foxhole with, or that in a tank with, or on the battlefield with? Like, it doesn't matter where you were, what you did. They lived it with you. You have nothing to hide. Like, be open and vulnerable with each other, man. Like, that's what this brotherhood, sisterhood is special for. Nobody else knows what we went through except for us, right? And it's good. One thing that Mellon said, and we've talked about it before, and I know he agrees with me. I know he was kind of reading, but I don't like to say PTSD. I like to say PTS, post-traumatic stress. Okay. I don't like the term disorder, like I'm messed up. Okay.
I like that.
The stuff that we experience in combat are things that we didn't necessarily sign up for, right? We have this vision. Yeah, I'll go over and we'll kill bad guys. There's so much gray area in between that stuff that I was never trained to handle or to live with. Being next to a roadside bomb and taking a blast, that's not normal. That is not normal to the human body. Jumping out of planes, being underwater, being shot at, being, all these different things, the extreme worst parts of human life have happened to you. That is not normal. So what do you expect? You're not going to come back regular or normal like you were. But to me, I don't like the word disorder, man, because like, if I do, if I do something that's not good for the human body or the human mind or whatever, it doesn't mean I have a disorder. It just means I was exposed to extreme stress, and it was just, like, it doesn't mean that I'm broken or that I'm messed up, or I'm less of a human for it. It's like, dude, I was just exposed to a lot of shit, and that's okay. There's ways back from it and ways to handle it and deal with it, but I'm not a bad person. I'm not messed up from it where I feel like I need to just identify as, well, I'm a broken person with a disorder.
Yeah, that's really good, Mike. It's the same way that a child who's been exposed to traumatic experiences, I like your distinction there, that we don't need to put this term disorder on the end of it. You've just been exposed to traumatic stress, and now you're trying to find your way forward. I really like that, Mike.
Yeah, I mean that's just a personal view for me, man. And because I've been around, I've talked to veterans, you know, and it's like, oh, I don't sleep well. Oh, you have PTSD. Well, hey, how's this? Well, I don't like crowds. I have PTSD. You know, I can't go in the bathroom by myself. Oh, I have PTSD. It's just like this common thing that's thrown out there. That's just like, what does it even mean anymore? What are you really feeling? You know, is it the VA just throwing pills at you every day, or is it your group of influence of other veterans who choose to self-medicate, that they're just like, hey, yeah, you're fucked up, man, hey, here, have some beers, have some drugs, and you know, we'll continue on, you know, great job. There's so many factors and it's so gray in there, but uh I just don't want to look at it as, man, I have a disorder, I'm broken. I've
Mm,
just been through a lot of stuff, man. It's just like lifting heavy weights. You're going to go in and you try to squat 500 pounds and your legs are shaking and it's just like this extreme amount of stress. Your body is not going to be the same as soon as you drop the weight. You're going to be
mm,
shaking, your blood pressure's up, you know, all these different stuff.
mm,
Does that mean you have a disorder? No, you were just exposed to an extreme stressful situation. Um, but it's, you can come back from it, you can recover from some of it, you know, not all of it. I know there's a lot of, you know, neurological damage that can happen and different things, like I totally understand. um but there's a large percentage that shouldn't be there, and it's a lot easier to identify, well, I have PTSD and I'm a broken soldier, and feel bad for me. You know, I've seen some stuff you don't understand. And they push this narrative and that stigma. And it's like, well, let's talk about it. No, I don't want to talk about it. You don't get it. You don't understand it. And they just put this wall up. And it's just like, dude, the wall was never meant to even be there. The wall was meant to
mm.
be brought down and to bring you back to normal society, because war is not normal. It is not normal. And that becomes normal for a lot of veterans of chaos and high stress situations. Like that's home to them. That's home to me sometimes. I'll tell you the
Yeah,
truth. But that's
that
not normal.
heightened that heightened nervous system. You're in that
Yes.
state of alertness and vigilance.
Yes. Is that who you're supposed to be for your wife or your husband? Is
Mm,
that who you're supposed to be for your children?
mm.
Right? No. They want mom and dad. They want husband and
Yeah,
wife. They don't want high stress warrior all the freaking time looking for the next adrenaline rush, looking where they can insert themselves into the biggest part of danger, or doing something so risky that they're risking their life for no reason except an adrenaline hit or a feel of importance. Like that's not who your family needs. You know, and when you stop and really try to understand that and look at the holistic picture outside of yourself, that you got to look outside of yourself and see the big picture, man. Like that is what we should be striving to see and to be at the same time. It's not easy, but there are groups of veterans out there who do realize this and are doing great things in the community, both military and civilian communities. And they're becoming leaders and outspoken because they cracked the code on how to get past
yeah,
things, and they're willing to put in the work instead of just saying, you know, fuck this, I'm broken, let's have beers, let's wear our grunt style t-shirts all the time and our all of our stuff and go around talk about how great we were 15 years ago in the military, but I've done nothing since. You know, it's hard, man. But it's ultimately what you signed up for. It wasn't going to be forever. You signed up to be exposed to the stress, and then you also signed up to also take that uniform off at one point and become something else, something better, something different for society. Not a burden, not not a casualty in your own mind. There are other things to be come from this, that others can benefit, your society, your family, all of it.
and it does seem like there's treatment that is getting more and more effective. There's research in this area happening all the time, and there are networks out there that are generating results. And just destigmatizing the reaching out for support and destigmatizing being the one who offers the hand. That we've talked about this before about the network. You can be the person supporting the individual on the high wire. You can be the person, the balance, or you can be the safety net below. And we don't we all have a role in supporting the individual who's having a hard time, and when you are the individual, in being less stigmatized to reach out for that support when you need it.
Yeah, it's not
Hey,
therapy.
Mike,
It's just a conversation. That's what I call it. Have a conversation. It's not counseling. It's not therapy. Just have a conversation, man. It's good. People are willing to listen and understand. Have a conversation.
great. I thought I'd just drop a little quick history of some US and Australian military combined service. For, you know, I mean, there's other people from other nationalities that listen into this, but you and I are American and Australian, so I can talk to us. But World War One was the first time that we served together in combat, and the first time there was American and Australian soldiers under one command was on the 4th of July in 1918, and it was in the Somme Valley in France, in a little village called Hamel. And it's probably more well known in Australia than in the US. It was, I think, about 7 to 10 companies of Americans who'd recently arrived, and it was Australians, about 5 divisions of Australians plus Brits. And the guy in charge is very well known in Australia, General Sir John Monash. There's like universities named after him. He's from Melbourne. He's a very highly regarded and loved figure in Australia. And it was the first time they had really combined arms. It was the first time that they had combined Air Force, artillery, tanks, and infantry. And the estimate from the general before the battle was it was going to be a 90-minute or less battle with the Germans, and it was actually a 93-minute battle. And this was one of the very first advances. So July 1918, and then August is when they really started to roll some really solid progress. But this was like the leading edge. And so that was the 4th of July, easy to remember, Independence Day 1918. So it was the last year of World War One. And there was Australians and Americans together on the Western Front in France. And then, so World War One, I'm just going to quickly list them. World War One, World War Two, the whole Cold War, so 47 to 91, the Korean War, Vietnam War, Gulf War One, 1990 and 91, Somalia, 92 to 95, they were together. 2001 onwards, the War on Terror, Gulf War Two, which is labelled as 03 to 11, Afghanistan, 01 onwards, and then Iraq, Syria, the counter ISIL stuff as well, 2014 to about 2018. So there's been a pretty long history of mateship between the Australian and US military, with a lot of, I'm sure there's been a lot of jokes and war stories exchanged, and probably many a cold beer had away from the front line between Australian and American military personnel. So quite a history.
And how special is it to say that we were part of it? Like Mellon was in Iraq for ISR, for American troops on the ground, running ISR for them and watching over their heads like an angel, and then, I'm in Afghanistan working, some instances here in and out with the Australian SAS, doing operations and going out and doing kinetic stuff. And it's cool, man. Like, that's been what, 105-year history.
Yeah.
And we can proudly say that we're very part of that percentage that we've worked together and done stuff for one another, for our cultures, for our way of life, our society, all of that, and that's something to be cherished. I'll never forget that. And now that you're like a brother to me, and in a lot of ways, in service and outside of service, but it's something special, man, that'll last forever, and it's days like November 11th that make you really stop and appreciate it. I mean, I appreciate it every day, but for the world to stop and recognize and be like,
that's right. Another point just to finish on is it can be a day where you're thinking about the sacrifice, but it can be easy to miss the progress that has come, that spread of democracy I was talking about earlier, that you can feel just because it's only bad news that gets reported, if it bleeds, it leads. I always say in the news world. So it's got to be a bad news story, or else people won't read it.
Yeah.
But the progress that has been made on the back of this Western Liberal Democratic Alliance is incredible to look at. and you can find it if you look up the UN Sustainability Goals. And the first round that they did, they all thought that they were absolute pie in the sky, crazy sort of angel shots, dream shots they were never going to get. But one stat is 5 times as many countries are now democracies as they were at the end of World War II. So 5 times as many democracies. Global rates of extreme poverty, 75% reduction since 1990. 75% of extreme poverty. Proportion of people living on less than $1.90 a day went from 36 million in 1990 to 8.6 million in 2018. And like childhood mortality so under 5-year-olds, a decrease of 47% from 2000 to 2016. So we're talking about really huge progress that has been made on the back of sacrifices made by serving members and veterans. And so people should really feel proud on these days when they're thinking about these losses and the sacrifice that these people have made, that they weren't in vain. There has been just an incredible flourishing and reduction in suffering around the world on the back of these efforts. And yes, I know there's more to do. There's more we can do. And we should never stop working towards progress. But it's worth stopping sometimes and looking back down the mountain and seeing the view behind as well, and not always just looking at the slope in front of you, because the challenges will always continue. But it's easy to lose sight on the progress that's been made because it doesn't make a news headline. People are not saying, stop the press, there's been a reduction in poverty or there's been an increase in democracy. But it's worth really taking the time on days like this to think, what were these sacrifices for? What has happened?
Yes. So yeah, Melon, that's perfect. I wrote a speech about a teammate of mine that was killed, and there was a lot of older and younger people in attendance. And I thought it was very important because there was some like JROTC and young military groups there. And then there was a bunch of older veterans, there was active duty veterans, and then civilians in there too. And I wanted to capture, and I reflected it off a few veterans that I know. And I wanted to sum up my point for this episode, but also communicate to people how important this is. The first thing we need to do is understand the history. Looking out through whether it's your particular country or Western society, whatever, understand the origins of service and why we do the things that we do in military service. Knowing that there was something in the world that called them to serve something bigger, whether it was World War I and II, where you're against fascism and extermination of societies, to Vietnam and communism, to the Cold War and the spread of communism and all that, to the global war on terror, understanding what was asked in the history of your people is number one. Number two is your present and understanding your purpose in this whole thing and where you fit in and what your country is asking of you. I love John F. Kennedy's quote of, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That resounds in my mind all the time. It's written in stone in Arlington National Cemetery among 400,000 graves that are all there. And every single one of those people asked that question. And then the next part, the final part, is think of the future. That torch needs to be passed on as it was to you. I remember my generation when I was a brand new guy coming in, and all the older guys explained very well the importance of what we were doing, and they were passing their spark before their career ended down to us for us to take and protect and flourish with and go whatever the next challenge was. It's up to this next generation to take care of it, to preserve all of us, and to understand that there has been generations and after generations of soldiers that have gone before us that have sacrificed way more than we can even comprehend, and you are being asked to be part of this in your time, in your life. and you need to go do it and see it. So understanding the past, understanding your present, and understanding that there is a potential future that is coming, that is more important than ever. If you can acknowledge all three of those, I think you can truly understand what it means to be a veteran and serve something bigger than yourself. So I asked you to reflect on that, whether you ever served or not. It's something I think about all the time. It's something I'm very proud of, that I was able to contribute as part of my life. That'll be forever, that no one will ever take away from me. And that's how I view it, man, that I was offered to be part of something that was so special for a period of my life. And now I just want to give thanks to it. I want to honor it. I want to spread it among my circle so that other people will understand. And it is a beautiful thing.
So well said, Mike. I really like that part about looking to the future and just thinking that progress that we're talking about is not automatic. You know, Western liberal democratic values are not like a natural state for humans. You know, like this is a recent thread, and the progress is hard won. And we're going to need the next generation to understand these values, which is why we engage in stuff like an episode like this, an education, a reminder, an opportunity to have conversations in families and over dinner tables and all that sort of thing is so important, because there can be a bit of a chest beating, black armband sense in the West at the moment. I think in the last 5 years, 10 years, that there's the sense that we're all the bad guys all of a sudden. But this is the best system there's ever been, and it's in our societies that people are allowed to, with the freedom of speech, to be able to have all the sorts of points of views, including the critical ones. But having the clarity around the sacrifice that's necessary sometimes to push back against the chaos, to push back against these crazy, murderous beliefs that can give rise to stuff like fascism and communism and some of those other terrible isms. We're going to need people who feel the same way and understand what we're doing, and that the progress is not inevitable. It's not just an automatic, we're going to fall forward into, more and more prosperity and easy times. Like, we do need people who understand and are willing to put their hand up and take a turn, being the ones who protect and provide the security that we can have these beautiful, flourishing periods of family time behind the wall that I hope is in your future as well, Mike.
Yeah, me too, man.
All right. So we've probably reached the end of another episode there. Great chat. Remembrance Day, we talked about the background of it, where it came from. World War I, Armistice Day, got changed to being called Remembrance Day after World War II. It incorporated a church service in the second year when they interred the bodies of the unknown soldiers who represented all the fallen. And each of our countries has a special place for these people. And it's an opportunity to stop and pause and take stock and think about the sacrifice and the loss. And, we talked about how we've done this together. There's been a joint effort, touched on some of the shared combat experiences of Australian and US military people. And we talked about, in the end there, some of the progress that's been made through inside the safe areas been provided by these military service personnel. So I think everyone should take time, 2 minutes on the 11th at 11 a.m. That's the time, local time, to stop and really pause and think about these things. It bears thinking about. But for this episode, is there anything else you'd like to leave people with, Mike, just before we wind up?
Just to all veterans and anybody who served, I just want to say personally thank you from myself, from my family. I don't take it lightly. I get it. I understand. And I just really, anytime I come across somebody that served, I really just want them to know that me and my family appreciate it. I don't care if I'm in, like, I see it every day. I see the sacrifices of people struggling, being away from their children at home while they're growing up, or their wife, or missing things, or crying on deployment because they can't be somewhere, or do something. Like, I see it all the time, just like all fellow veterans have. And I just want to say thank you. Today's your day. And, I won't ever forget. And for anybody else that's listening, again, I really want to expand on that future piece is we're all depending on you. Um, I was told that as a young man, we're depending on you, so that they did their time and they can enjoy their peace. I'm doing my time and I want to enjoy my peace, and I'm asking the next generation to stand up, and I'm depending on you just like I was dependent on, and it goes all the way back to the beginning. We're depending on you to be good people, to be good citizens, to be good service people, to be good military members. Um, we're all depending on each other for a better future. And yeah, I give thanks to the people who have raised their hand and done it.
Right. Beautiful place to end it. So from Mike and I, all of you guys out there, thank you very much. We really appreciate your service and your contribution. And until next week, take care.